Brad Meltzer is a terrific thriller writer, a #1 New York Times bestselling author with books such as The Inner Circle and The Escape Artist. He's got 9 other best-selling thrillers. He's also authored nonfiction books that have been bestsellers like History Decoded. His new book is a true thriller story that takes place in 1776. It's called The First Conspiracy, The Secret Plot to Kill George Washington. Brad, it's good to see you. How are you?
I'm good to see you too. I think I saw you once at one of the Edgars or somewhere.
I think it was the International Thriller Writers we talked.
Oh, maybe it was ITW. Yeah, we got it. The thing is, that whenever writers get together at these events, it's like group therapy.
It is. I think that's why they do it, right? It's the only time.
Why else to go, of course, and to be complimented. The 2 things we love most.
Groups and therapy, you mean?
And compliments.
And compliments, exactly. So you're a big time writer of fictional thrillers. What made you turn to a true story?
Yeah, I just had never found the story that held my attention long enough that I felt like it could be, and a full book. A full book takes something that's far more meatier. And I found nearly a decade ago this story in the place where the best stories always hide, in the footnotes. And I found this story, and it said it was a secret plot to kill George Washington. And I was like, a plot to kill George Washington? Is this real? Is this fake? Is this internet nonsense? What is it? And it was true. In 1776, there was a loyalist British plot to kill George Washington. And when George Washington found out about it, he rounded up those responsible. He built a gallows, and he hanged the man in front of 20,000 people, the largest public execution at that point in North American history. George Washington brought the hammer down, was like, don't mess with me. I'm George Washington. I'm going to be on the money one day. But and that's what happened. And it really led to my first nonfiction book. Here it is. It's called The First Conspiracy, The Secret Plot to Kill George Washington.
So what's happening when this plot is going on? This is basically during the Siege of New York. Is that right?
Yeah, it's right before New York. It's right before the British come. It's in June of 1776 is where it really peaks, although it starts nearly a year before. And what happens is, you can see, just to talk about who's responsible, because you got to ask, who wants to kill George Washington? Beyond, of course, the British want to kill him, but who really wants to come after him is the governor of New York and the mayor of New York at the time, who were kicked out of their positions. They were under the crown, realized they've lost their power. And they start looking, who's closest to Washington? Now, here's the key point that I found that just blew me away, is George Washington, this is all real, in 1776, he had his own personal bodyguards. And these bodyguards, he asked all of his regiments, he said, give me your 4 best men. He wanted what they call drilled men, the best of the best. And what he wanted was, he took from those 4, from each regiment, he narrowed it down personally to his 50 or so best. And from there, they made what they called the general's guards, the commander's guards, but the name that stuck was this name, the life guards, because they were in charge of guarding George Washington's life. That's where the term is. And these were the men who turned on George Washington. And I don't care how strong you are. I don't care that you become the president one day. At this moment in time, at the beginning of the war, this is devastating to George Washington.
So it's his actual bodyguards turned on him, like a kind of a mafia thing?
It's truly, I mean, you can almost hear the Coppola score that comes in at the moment. If you're a Jedi fan, Order 66, it starts being, the 666 comes. But the reality, that's what happens. And the plan is when the British are about to invade, when they're coming, that all these men who are on the actual British side, but are in our army, in our military, are going to switch sides. They're going to steal some cannons. They're going to blow up some bridges. And some said to kidnap George Washington, some said to kill him right there. Either way, the result's the same, because at George Washington's level, you didn't make trades with military men, which was what you used to do back then. At his level, you hang him. So he's going down. And the amazing part is what George Washington does when he gets wind of it. Because one of the things that he realizes is he needs to figure out information. He has, and he's putting together this great offense, right? We have the army there. But what he needs, he realizes, is a great defense, because people are going to come at him from all sides. So he puts together a secret committee. They call it, and as you know, all thriller writers know, you got to have a good name for your secret committee. They originally called it the Committee on Intestine Enemies. It's the worst name of all time. And they changed that name, and they instead call it the Committee on Conspiracies. And with a good name, they put John Jay in charge of it, of course, becomes the first Supreme Court justice. And John Jay, three of them, it's John Jay, Philip Livingston, and Governor Morris are the only three they trust. It narrows down to them. They start truly kicking in doors, interrogating people, and getting information. And what they're doing in the process, and what you see in the book, when you read the first conspiracy, I love that you get to see the plot to kill George Washington. What I love more, it's the launch of America's first counterintelligence agency. And what they do, we all think that the CIA today, that the precursor to the CIA is the OSS, but it's not. It's actually this moment in time, the first conspiracy, because what John Jay is doing is building that first agency. In fact, right now in CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia today, there is actually a room that is dedicated to John Jay, who they call the father of counterintelligence.
Really? No kid. I did not know that. And is that based on this?
Based on the, because he goes on from here and he launches an entire career of counterintelligence movement. And the whole book is about not just the plot, but the rise of counterintelligence, how this is all built secretly within our own government at the time. And of course, what it also does, and I think, what interests you probably the most is also, it deals with the character of George Washington.
That's what I was going to ask you about next, actually. I wanted to know, and in researching, what did you find? How did you find Washington? Yeah.
And it's interesting, Washington is not like Jefferson or Adams, who are writing these lovingly, all their emotions, letters to their wives, telling them every feeling they're having. Washington plays everything close to the vest. And Washington, we think, we're divided today as a country, but Washington's time was no different. At the time in 1776 in New York City, there were nearly as many loyalists on the British side as there were patriots on the American side. And it was no different in our own military. Our own military, we weren't one union. We had the regiments from Massachusetts, hated the regiments from Virginia, hated the regiments from, we were all different uniforms. We didn't even wear the same uniform. Not like today, there's no common uniform. Everyone wore what they wore. Some guys just showed up in work shirts. And there's an amazing scene in the book where George Washington comes in and he sees the Massachusetts regiment at Harvard Yard is meeting the Virginia regiment. And the Virginia regiment is wearing this kind of frilly uniform. They make fun of them. Fight breaks out. These guys start going at it. And George Washington gets off his horse, races in, grabs the two guys by the throats, shaking them, and he's basically like, stop fighting with each other. We're on the same team. And man, if ever there were a metaphor for where we are today, that's it. Right? George Washington, there was no United States back then. We have leaders right now. Again, forget about politics. I mean, so often they take flags and wrap themselves in it. There was no flag back then. There was no United States back then. George Washington helped build it by putting his arms around it and willing it to be. And to me, I think, what I love is, yes, you see the counterintelligence part. Yes, you see the plot to kill him, but you get the depth of George Washington's character.
It is an amazing thing that for all the kind of revisionist history, he's the one guy they don't seem to be able to lay a glove on. He actually was what everybody saw at the time. He was basically the heart of the country. And without him, there would be no country. Yeah.
That's right. I mean, one of the things that my favorite moments in the book is this moment after the Battle of Brooklyn is taking place. And we're in the middle of the Battle of Brooklyn. And we all think, again, we held hands. This is how we teach it to our kids. And we dreamed a good dream. And we all came together and we took down the British. And then the end, and everyone lived happily ever after. But it was not like that at all. We got our rear ends kicked. The British wiped the floor with us in Brooklyn. Yeah. George Washington got out-generaled. He didn't have the experience of the British generals. Or what did he have? We didn't have gunpowder. We barely had shoes. And in that moment, George Washington could have beat his chest and said, we're going to go out in a blaze of glory. We're going to take all of them with us. We're the machoest and the best around. They're going to remember us for the ages. But he doesn't. What he does instead is he does the best thing that George Washington always does. He adapts. And in that moment, he plans a daring escape. In the middle of the night, he's pinned, right? He's pinned against the East River. The only thing in front of him is the British. The only thing behind him is the East River. In the middle of the night, at a time when they're supposed to surrender, his surrender is going to come the next morning, he commandeers every boat that they can find on the East River, and he slowly starts putting his men aboard. But the key thing, here's the key moment. He won't get on board any of the ships until George Washington won't get on any of the ships until all of his men are aboard first. He will risk his life for those men. And that's that moment where we come together as a country and you see what we're made of. We've lost the word united in United States, but it's there. It's there, man. We got to get it back. Well, but Washington is the one who led us there.
I want to get back to that in a minute, especially when it comes to the business of thriller writing. But before that, I just want to get your reaction to the Wall Street Journal review today that sort of suggested that maybe this whole idea that they were actually going to assassinate Washington was propaganda. Do you think they had any valid
Yeah, no, the Wall
argument?
Street Journal gave us a really, it was a nice review to
It's a
this.
nice review, yeah. Yeah.
Review, a nice review, really nice review. But the one thing he took issue with is like, how do you really know whether it was a plot to kidnap him, whether to kill him, or was just propaganda to kind of gin up the war? And we deal with it in the book. Listen, you have to ask that question, right? Yeah. The one thing he left out, and the one thing I do take issue with, and this is why we knitted out the place we knitted out, is he's right in the sense that if you just listen to the American side, it could be propaganda. It could have been something they made up to just excite everyone about the book. But here's the key piece he was missing. And at the end of the war, when the war was over, the mayor of New York City, a guy named David Matthews, goes back. He wants to get his pension from the British. He's a guy who fought. The war's over. They lost, but he still wants his money for what he fought for. And he goes in front of the British, and we found the transcript of what he asked for and what he demanded from the British. And they basically said, well, what'd you do during the war? And he alone, the war's over. He's got no more reason to lie. He can say, I fought, I lost, I won, I spied, I did whatever. And he's the one who said, we plotted to go after George Washington.
Yeah, they did not mention that in the review. That's actually unfair.
And that was the part that I was like, come on, man, you're leaving out the... I mean, I didn't want to say it on air because it kind of ruins a big part of the book, but it's the moment, man.
Yeah.
When your own guy confesses, that's where you go, oh crap. And the other part I think that is vital is, I always say, anyone who tells you, there's many history books written about Benedict Arnold did this or George Washington thought that and they thought this and they thought, no one knows what they thought. Anyone who tells you what they thought is a big fat liar. As a fiction writer, I know I'm under more scrutiny than the average history person, right? Because they're chomping at the bit to say, did he make it up? What did he do? Is this fiction? We got 500 plus footnotes, 35 pages of footnotes in this book to back this one up. And last night, one of the guys who also wrote another book came to one of our signings and asked the exact same question that the Wall Street Journal, and we gave the same answer. And he said it in front of everyone. You'll see it on C-SPAN because they're going to show it. And he said, that's a really good point, and I wish I thought of it.
Yeah.
And when you really look at the evidence, we say in it, you can't definitively know anything because the plot was foiled. And once they foiled the plot, we don't know what they were going to actually really do.
Right.
But I think it's pretty clear that George Washington's life, no matter what they were going to do, kidnap him or whether they're going to kill him immediately, his life was most certainly in danger.
I have to ask you this before I let you go. You've written a book that is it's essentially patriotic. I mean, the things that you're saying about George Washington, which I think are absolutely true, are against the kind of revisionist history we get from some quarters. You've come on the show, which I can tell you will ruin your reputation for the rest of your life. Do you find, and you are also very highly involved with the structures of the business with the international thriller writers and the mystery writers. Do you find that political correctness, that the same kind of move towards censorship, the same kind of move toward leftist ideas that has really harmed a lot of literature and a lot of Hollywood, do you find that coming into the thriller field, or you think there's enough resistance to keep the field free for all different kinds of voices?
I think that here's the one thing that's the most powerful thing in the world is an idea. There's nothing more powerful than an idea. And as a result, what's a story? It's a collection of ideas. To me, the thing that I don't like and that drives me crazy is I hate the shorthand labeling we do. I actually hate saying a leftist idea as much as I hate saying a right side idea.
Okay.
I was with my friend, President George H.W. Bush, and I read this book to him right before he passed. And I know the Bushes a long time. They're dear friends. And one of the things that I know that drove them crazy and it drives me crazy, I'll speak for myself rather than speak for him, is when we were reading those George Washington parts, we were talking about there's a key moment and President Bush is about to fall asleep on me. And they said, he's sick. He'll be awake about 10 minutes. That's going to be the end of the story. And I said, that's okay. I'll read him for 10 minutes, former president. And I'm in Kennebunkport, Maine to honor Barbara Bush. And as I'm reading to him, I get to the part where we get to the Declaration of Independence. And I read those words, right? We hold those truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. And I get to that word and he just bolts awake. His eyes go wide and he wakes up and I say, you want to read another chapter? Another? Another. And we do a full hour. Wow. They tell me 10 minutes, full hour. It's like he's recharged. And I tell you that story because when he passed away, the word that got mentioned over and over was this word decency. And yes, it was because he was a decent man. But I think when we label, it's my long-winded answer to you, when we label the left did this and the right did this, and this is if you're right, you think this. I mean, right before you came on, you were saying, like, I have issues with Trump on this moral level. That should not be a left side thinking idea, right?
Sure.
We should all be able to say there's good parts, there's bad parts. Instead, what we do is we want to divide everything to black and white. You're left, you're right. That's how we've made our decision on you. And in this book, you'll see one of the things we write about. The great thing is that equality. We have to see ourselves as equal and assume we're all equal. And if you do that, then criticize all you want, but show respect, show decency. That's what's lost. And when we lose that, those voices. That's what kills voices. Now, is there a conspiracy by the left side to keep right side readers out? I think if you have a good voice and you have a good story, nothing can stop it. There's nothing more powerful than that good story and a good idea. And you see it all the time. You see those that no matter what you want to say, something's controlled by this side or that side. You can bring the most liberal author in the whole world and break them through sometimes on a conservative show, and you're like, wow, that's just a good idea.
Yep,
and
good stories.
And that's what I believe in. I believe in a good idea.
Brad, speaking of good stories, the story about Bush is a great story. Your book is The First Conspiracy, The Secret Plot to Kill George Washington. It's really good to see you. I hope I see you again soon, and thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks, sir.